Hello, in this third part of the video, I will be talking about teaching and learning and what that looks like in Industry 4.0. Despite the advancement in technology that we've been talking up to this point, we cannot abandon the best practices in teaching and learning that we know so far. So things like faculty and student contact, things that we know for sure works. Student-to-student contact is also very important. And we've learned that peer learning is just as important as faculty teaching to students. There's also lots of studies that have been done in the last couple of decades on active learning that we can apply today that we should continue to use in our classroom. And there's also this concept of prompt feedback. When we are teaching, students require feedback for them to know whether or not they're on track. So if we can provide them prompt feedback, then it will help them to learn. There's also this concept of time on task. When students are engaged in a topic or in an activity, the more time they invest in it, the more they will learn. And this has been proven over and over again. Faculty's expectations of students and how they set certain standards in their class also has been found to be directly correlated to how students perform. So if faculty have very high standards and expectations, then students typically do better than classes where faculty may not have those same standards. Diverse learning is about how to use different types of media, different types of technologies, different forms of learning so that it goes beyond the typical lecture and the written essay. Maybe it's the use of videos, maybe it's the creation of screencasts like what I'm doing now, that these are different ways that students are able to engage in the learning in the class. And then finally, we've learned that experiential learning, whether it's an internship locally or whether it's traveling abroad, these have been found to be what they call high impact practices. And so collectively, these principles and many others like them have been proven to be very effective, and we need to continue using these practices going forward. At the same time, we need to help students engage in today's very fast, very on demand, and very technologically enhanced world. And so, this first thing I have here is about teaching students to pay attention. Attention has become the most precious commodity in the 21st century. So the ability to pay attention is so critical. That's something that we need to start thinking about and incorporating into our teaching practices. Things that we've also learned in recent years from learning science is that sleep is critical to how students learn, regardless of intelligence and abilities. Students who are sleep deprived oftentimes do not perform well, and they've shown this over and over again. The brain also works best when the body is moving, and so instead of sitting for an hour listening to a lecture, it's best to move around. That's why active learning classrooms are so important in today's society. And also in my office, I'm actually standing at my standing desk because I believe that when you're standing and you're moving your body, the brain actually is performing at its optimal. You also have multisensory learning, which trumps unisensory learning. For example, instead of just listening to a lecture, what about experiencing a lecture, and what would that mean and how would that look like? Uh, when students are exposed to new material, especially for adult students, they need to know how it connects with their existing body of knowledge. These sort of concept maps are things that have been found to be very effective in the primary and secondary grade level, where whenever a new concept is introduced, teachers always relate it back to something they've already taught. There's also this idea of pace practice over time, uh, how uh, how you study instead of cramming at the very end. If you kind of separate the learning over time, then it actually will improve performance. And then fostering growth mindset is important. Carol Dweck from Stanford wrote a book called Mindset, and it talks about this idea that people with growth mindsets often face challenge and problems and failures in a very, very different way than those who have fixed mindset. And so, in today's rapidly moving society, we need to help students foster a growth mindset, helping them develop this ability to adapt quickly and to make adjustments as they go. Finally, there's this idea of practicing mindfulness. I've noticed this more and more at conferences that I attend in recent years, where they would typically at the beginning of a session help the group focus before they start, so that it helps them to clear their mind. It's just related to a lot of the Eastern religion in terms of how this idea of being present when you want to focus. So these are things that in recent 5 to 10 years have been more prominent in neuroscience and in education research. There are different pathways to learning in the 21st century in the industrial 4.0. So what we know so far is that classroom learning is very common, and it's still the most predominant model. But then we have also in the last video, I talked a little bit about blended learning and the flipped classroom and how that works and how you get the best of both worlds, the online learning as well as the face-to-face learning. And online learning is very big in the United States and in other places. I know that in Taiwan it may not be, but it is definitely a growing area for the United States, and it will continue to grow. I believe at this point, 1/3 of all courses offered in the United States are online, and it will just continue to go up. Beyond these traditional approaches, there's also this idea of mobile learning, which is how do you use your mobile phone or your tablet to be able to uh, take a course or even go to university. There are actually some experiments around the world where universities are starting to build their programs on for the mobile platform. So that's an interesting development, especially for countries where people can only afford a mobile phone. Maybe a computer is still too expensive, or even anything, maybe a tablet might be able to afford. But can you deliver education through mobile platform of some sort? And then you have distance learning, which is the idea of connecting classrooms and people from different places, around the world. So instead of limiting your class to just the teacher and the students in that immediate location, what about connecting to folks around the country, if not around the world, so that enhances the learning experience? And then finally, lifelong learning has been a big topic in the United States in recent years. Um, the half life of knowledge that people have when they get a degree, typically it's usually 3 to 5 years after a bachelor degree before that degree becomes obsolete. And in the doctoral level, it's probably 5 to 7 years. And so there's this constant need to be to upgrading skills and upgrading their knowledge and understanding. And so universities are thinking about how do we continue to be a provider of education for the life span of a particular individual. There's also immersive technologies in education that are changing how we learn. You see here this little diagram on the top of going from reality to virtual and the mix in between. How do we learn and interact and be able to function in this kind of new environment? There's lots of companies like Microsoft and Facebook that owns Oculus and Vive that are developing these immersive systems that allow you to essentially manipulate the world around you. And how do we do that in education? That's something that we need to seriously think about. Along with that is this idea of big data. Big data has been a discussion in the United States as well. And when it comes to big data, there's these basic ideas of how do you use data in learning management systems and the different systems that we are employ in the university to improve our visibility and understanding of student performance, of faculty effectiveness, of administrative operational efficiencies. And that's a big area that I think will be uh, lots of new breakthroughs will happen in this field of big data in education. And then we cannot obviously ignore artificial intelligence in education. There are companies like Alex. McGraw-Hill makes this product called Alex, which is an adaptive learning platform where as you do the work and if you do well, then it will give you harder problems. If you don't do well, then it will serve you with easier problems so that it will adjust according to the student's ability. You also have Duolingo, that is a language app. They have found, independent studies have found that someone using Duolingo for 6 months in a diligent manner is equivalent to 2 years of college level foreign language. So that's pretty amazing, to be able to use some app that is actually going to help a person learn a foreign language a lot faster than the traditional way. And then you also have Newton and Turnitin and Khan Academy and others that are really trying to leverage technology and artificial intelligence and the different technological breakthroughs to really advance education. This table of growing and declining skills from the World Economic Forum provide some clues as to what and how we should teach in the future. And so if you look at the growing list, you see things like analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, and creativity and originality, initiative. And then you see the declining table list there is manual dexterity, endurance, precision, memory, verbal, auditory, and spatial ability. So those things that traditionally used to be very important are declining in their importance over time. One way we can help prepare students for the fourth industrial revolution is to focus on whole person education. Unlike modern education that emphasizes knowledge acquisition, which is about the mind development, and vocational preparation, which is about the body development, the ultimate aim of whole person education is to develop the student into leaders who will leverage both the technical and the human skills to serve the greater good. So let's look at the whole person education in different ways. So when we talk about whole person education, there's the development of the mind, which is, when you talk about active learning, it's about the thinking skills of some sort. The interactions, is at the intellectual level, and then the Bloom's taxonomy, that's the remembering and understanding. But then when you talk about the hands, it's the activities, it's the experience, it's what you do, and the applications of that. And that's something that I think we can think about more carefully as we plan and prepare for our lessons and our courses and our programs. And also about the heart. This is where, we help students develop sympathy and emotional understanding of arts and of different issues in society. And that's something that oftentimes is missing in a lot of our education today. And then finally, this idea of focusing and helping them be more human, as the video in the first part talked about. How do we become more human in a technologically advanced age? And here the focus is on being, and the interactions is the spiritual dimension, and the creation of new understanding and new narratives and new origins and new meaning. I mean, that's something that is very missing. That's very absent in today's education. In the World Economic Forum white paper, Values, Ethics, and Innovations, they talked about how today, more than ever, values and ethics is so critical to the fourth industrial revolution. I've excerpted a few quotes from this report that highlights what they are trying to convey, and you can read the report if you want some of the details. So this first quote: "The values of ethics of technological development must be addressed at this critical moment in history. To build a just and equitable society, the process must start with people, with their logic, ideals, experience, empathy, and collaboration. Technologies inevitably embody the values of their creators, whether a small team of engineers or a large group of nations imagining a collective identity. So these are sort of worldviews built into the technologies that we oftentimes don't question and we just take for granted. Engineering and business ethics often focus narrowly on compliance and procedure rather than on a broader duty to think about the potential societal impact. The complexity of converging technologies requires skill sets in science, humanities, business, and the arts. So it's not, students cannot be singularly trained in a particular discipline. They need to think multidisciplinarily or interdisciplinary to be effective. And then the last quote here is, we need to invest in technological development that doesn't lose sight of the true ends of technological progress, which is about social progress and the well-being of humanity. Dov Sedman, the founder and CEO of LRN, which is a nonprofit organization, says that behavior is the new competitive advantage in the 21st century, or in Industry 4.0. In this quote, he says, companies around the world are struggling with issues of productivity, leadership development, accountability, engagement, misconduct, and a general failure to meet their potential. Those that can align behaviors to sustainable human values and conduct business with integrity outperform and deliver disproportionate long-term value. So Dov Sedman wrote an article recently in Fortune magazine where he talks about the four keys to being a better boss. And in a different way of putting that is four pillars of moral leadership. So the first pillar he talks about is moral leaders are driven by purpose. So purpose is about the fundamental nature of an organization's endeavor. The more worthwhile the endeavor, the more it elevates and can generate dedication, devotion, and hope among its employees. So moral leaders are developed when they are pursuing a worthy, valuable, and noble purpose connected to human progress and the betterment of the world. A second pillar of moral leadership is this idea of inspiring and elevating others. So those with moral authority understand that they can demand of others and what they must inspire in them. So honesty, for example, can be demanded, but loyalty must be inspired. Moral leaders do not ask for personal loyalty to themselves, but rather ask their employees for their loyalty to the overall purpose and mission of the organization. The third pillar of moral leadership is about courage and patience. Instead of doing the next thing right, moral leaders are focused on doing the next right thing. And it takes courage to do that, because oftentimes such action has the potential to put the leader in an uncomfortable or a vulnerable territory. And so they really require courage and patience. And moral leaders also need to be more patient, because that way allows others to be more thorough and rigorous and creative, and patience allow for reflections and the chance to consider the broader, longer term outcomes of any action. And finally, moral leaders keep building muscle. And what this means is that authentic leaders don't stop learning or growing just because they have accumulated some sort of formal authority in an organization. They continue to learn, they continue to wrestle with the questions of right and wrong, and fairness and justice, and how they serve others, and what doesn't work and what does work. And so I've come to the end of my talk. Here are some further readings for you. If you want to learn about Education 4.0, here are some great books that have come out in the last couple of years on around this topic. So I encourage you to take a look at some of them. If you want to learn more about what life is like in 4.0 and how to get a handle on that, here are some suggested readings for you. And then finally, here are the references of things that I've mentioned in this talk. So thanks for listening. I hope this has been a helpful talk for you.